The gun trembled in his hand. Blood pooled on the cracked concrete. Corinne's fingers hovered over the alarm button as the masked man's eyes locked onto hers through the security glass. 3 seconds, two choices. One mistake that would haunt a small town forever. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not here. Not to her. But when the unexpected hero finally emerged, nobody, not the police, not the media, not even Corinne herself, would believe who it was. The fluorescent lights of Murphy's Gas and Go hummed their eternal monotone song, casting harsh shadows across the rows of candy bars and motor oil. Corinne Hoa wiped down the counter for the third time that hour, her reflection distorted in the smudged plexiglass barrier that separated her from the customers. Outside, Highway 47 stretched into darkness, a ribbon of asphalt connecting their nowhere town of Millbrook to the slightly less nowhere towns beyond. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in March, and Corinne was counting down the minutes until her shift ended at midnight. 13 minutes. She could make it 13 more minutes. "You're doing it again," came a voice from the doorway to the back office. Corinne looked up to see Tommy Nguyen, the assistant manager, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. At 26, he was only 3 years older than Corinne, but he carried himself with the worn-out authority of someone who'd been working the night shift too long. "Doing what?" Corinne asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. "That thing where you clean the same spot over and over." Tommy stepped into the fluorescent glare, his Murphy's polo shirt wrinkled from a double shift. "You've been weird all week. What's going on?" Corinne tossed the rag into the bin beneath the counter. "Nothing's going on. I'm just tired." "Bullshit." Tommy moved closer, lowering his voice even though they were alone. "Is it your mom again?" The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of tension through Corinne's shoulders. She turned away, pretending to reorganize the cigarette display behind her. "I don't want to talk about it." "Corinne." "I said I don't want to talk about it, Tommy." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken history. Tommy had been there 6 months ago when Corinne's mother had shown up at the gas station at 2 in the morning, drunk and screaming about how Corinne had abandoned the family. He'd been the one to call the police when she wouldn't leave. He'd been the one to drive Corinne home afterward because she was shaking too hard to hold the steering wheel. "Okay," Tommy said finally, "but if you need anything." "I know, thanks." Tommy nodded and retreated to the office, leaving Corinne alone with the hum of refrigerators and the distant sound of traffic. She checked her phone. 11:51 p.m. 9 minutes. The bell above the door chimed, and Corinne looked up automatically, her customer service smile already in place. A man walked in mid-30s, wearing a faded denim jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. Nothing unusual about him except the way he moved. Too careful, too deliberate, like someone trying very hard to appear casual. "Evening," Corinne said. "Can I help you find something?" The man didn't answer. He walked slowly down the center aisle, his hands in his pockets, his head turning slightly to take in the security cameras mounted in the corners. Corinne felt something cold settle in her stomach. The bell chimed again. Another man entered, taller, broader, wearing a hoodie despite the mild weather. He positioned himself near the magazine rack, close to the door but with a clear view of the counter. Corinne's hand moved toward the panic button beneath the register, then stopped. She was being paranoid. 2 guys stopping for gas and snacks, perfectly normal, happened all the time. But then the first man turned down the chip aisle, and Corinne saw his reflection in the curved security mirror mounted on the wall. He was looking directly at her, and his eyes were calculating, measuring, assessing. "Tommy," Corinne called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "Can you come out here for a second?" No response. "Tommy." The first man emerged from the aisle empty-handed and walked toward the counter. Corinne's fingers found the panic button, hovering over it. "Pack of Marlboro Reds," the man said. His voice was flat, rehearsed. Corinne turned to grab the cigarettes, and that's when she heard the second man lock the front door. The click of the deadbolt was the loudest sound in the world. Corinne spun around, the cigarette pack still in her hand, and saw the first man pull a gun from his jacket, a black semi-automatic that looked too big, too real, too wrong under the fluorescent lights of Murphy's Gas and Go. "Open the register," he said quietly. "Don't scream, don't do anything stupid." Time fractured into a series of crystalline moments. Corinne saw the gun, saw the man's finger on the trigger, saw the second man moving toward her from the side, pulling his own weapon, saw Tommy's office door, still closed, unaware. "I said open it." The first man's voice was harder now, edged with something that might have been fear or might have been excitement. "Now." Corinne's training kicked in, the 90-minute video they'd all been forced to watch about robbery procedures. Don't be a hero. Give them what they want. Your life is worth more than the money. Her hands trembled as she reached for the register. The drawer popped open with a cheerful ding, revealing the pathetic collection of bills inside. Maybe $300. They worked a Tuesday night shift at a highway gas station. There was never much money in the drawer. "Is that it?" The second man's voice came from her left, aggressive and accusatory. "Where's the rest?" "That's all we keep in the register," Corinne said, adding how small her voice sounded. "We do deposits every—" "The safe," the first man gestured with the gun. "Where's the safe?" Corinne's mind raced. The safe was in the office, where Tommy was. If she told them that, they'd go back there and Tommy would do something stupid because that's who Tommy was. Someone who thought he could fix things, someone who'd try to be a hero. "There is no safe," Corinne lied. "The deposits go straight to the bank. We use an armored car service." The first man's eyes narrowed. "You're lying." "I'm not, I swear. Look, take the register money and whatever you want from the store, just take it and go." The second man slammed his hand on the counter, making Corinne jump. "Don't tell us what to do, we ask the questions." "Easy, Ray," the first man said, and Corinne filed away the name, wondering if she'd live long enough to tell anyone. Ray, the second man was called Ray. The first man leaned closer to the plexiglass barrier, his gun now pointed directly at Corinne's face. "I'm going to ask you one more time. Where is the safe?" "There isn't." The office door opened. Everything happened in slow motion and all at once. Tommy stepped out, saw the guns, and his expression shifted from confusion to understanding to determination in the space of a heartbeat. His hand dropped to his waistband, where Corinne knew he kept his grandfather's old .38 special, the one he wasn't supposed to bring to work, the one he'd shown her once during a slow night shift, the one she'd told him was stupid and dangerous. "Tommy, no!" Corinne screamed. But Tommy was already moving, pulling the revolver from his waistband, his face set in that stubborn expression she knew too well. The first robber spun toward him. Ray raised his gun. Tommy got his weapon up, pointing it at Ray. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the enclosed space. Tommy staggered backward, his eyes wide with surprise. The .38 special clattered to the floor. He looked down at his chest, where a dark stain was spreading across his wrinkled Murphy's polo shirt, and then his legs gave out and he collapsed. "No, no, 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 no." Corinne was screaming now, pressing herself against the back wall, her hands over her mouth. Tommy lay on the floor, not moving, blood pooling beneath him. "Jesus Christ!" Ray was backing toward the door, his gun still extended. "You said nobody would get hurt. You said it was just a gas station." "Shut up," the first man's voice cracked. "Shut up and let me think." But Ray was already unlocking the door, yanking it open. I'm out, man, this wasn't the plan." He ran into the night, leaving the first man alone with a dead assistant manager and a witness behind plexiglass. The man turned back to Corinne, and she saw the panic in his eyes, the realization that everything had gone wrong, that there was no good way out of this. She saw him look at Tommy's body, saw him look at his gun, saw him look at her. "Please," Karen whispered, "please don't." The man's hand was shaking. The gun wavered. Behind him, through the windows, Karen could see a pickup truck pulling into the parking lot, probably someone stopping for gas. Someone who had no idea what they were about to walk into. The man saw it too. He looked at the truck, then back at Karen, his face a mask of desperation and rage. "This is your fault," he said, and Karen heard the finality in his voice, the decision being made. "You should have just told me where the safe was." His finger tightened on the trigger. Karen slammed her palm down on the panic button. The silent alarm went straight to the county sheriff's office, 15 miles away. Help would come, eventually, if she survived long enough. The man fired. The bullet struck the plexiglass barrier, and for one impossible moment, Karen thought it would hold. The glass was supposed to be bulletproof. That's what Murphy's corporate had promised. That's what they'd told her during training. A crack appeared. Then another. The third shot shattered the barrier completely, sending fragments of safety glass cascading across the counter like deadly rain. Karen dove to the floor, her hands over her head, shards cutting into her palms. She heard the man climbing through the broken barrier, heard his boots crunching on glass, heard him breathing hard, panicked, trapped. "Where is it?" He was standing over her now. Karen could see his shoes, cheap sneakers, worn at the toes. "Where's the money? Where's the safe?" Karen couldn't speak, couldn't move. Tommy was dead. The safe was in the office. If she told him, he'd find maybe $2,000 in cash. If she didn't tell him, he'd kill her. The truck outside had parked at a pump. Through the gaps beneath the shelving units, Karen could see legs, someone getting out, walking toward the store. The man saw it too. He cursed and pressed the gun against Karen's temple. "Call out to them," he hissed. "Tell them the store's closed. Tell them to go away." Karen's voice came out as a croak. "We're closed." Louder. "We're closed. Come back tomorrow." The legs outside the window stopped. There was a long pause. "You sure?" A man's voice muffled by distance and glass. "Lights are on." "System malfunction," the robber shouted, keeping the gun pressed to Karen's head. "Store's closed. Go to the Shell station 10 miles east." Another pause. Then the legs moved back toward the truck. The engine started. Taillights receded into the darkness of Highway 47. The man exhaled, releasing a breath he'd been holding. But the gun stayed against Karen's head. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, we're going to do this calm. You're going to show me where the money is. Then I'm going to tie you up and leave. Nobody else has to get hurt. Understand?" Karen nodded, the barrel of the gun cold against her skin. "Good, stand up slowly." She rose on shaking legs, glass falling from her hair and clothes. The man kept the gun on her as she stepped over Tommy's body, still, silent, gone, and moved toward the office. The safe was an old model Sentry, bolted to the floor beneath the desk. Karen's hands trembled so badly she could barely work the combination. First try failed. Second try failed. "Hurry up," the man said behind her. Third try, the lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside was less than $1,800 in cash, bundled in deposit bags. The man stared at it for a long moment, and Karen heard him make a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. $1,800, he said. "I killed a man for $1,800. He grabbed the bags and shoved them into his jacket pockets. Then he looked around the office, at the filing cabinets, the ancient computer, the employee schedule pinned to the wall, and Karen saw him making calculations, weighing options. When he looked back at her, his eyes were flat and decided. "I'm sorry," he said and raised the gun. Karen closed her eyes. The gunshot never came. Instead, there was a crash from the front of the store, glass breaking, someone shouting. The man spun toward the sound, and Karen opened her eyes to see a figure charging through the front door, moving fast, moving with purpose. It wasn't the police. The police were still miles away, sirens in the distance getting closer but not close enough. It was someone else entirely. The new arrival hit the robber like a linebacker, driving him into the filing cabinets with enough force to rattle the entire office. The gun flew from the man's hand, skittering across the floor. Karen scrambled for it, her fingers closing around the grip just as the two men crashed into the desk. She raised the gun with both hands, pointing it at the struggling figures, but she couldn't get a clear shot. They were moving too fast, too tangled together. The robber was bigger, but the new arrival was fighting with a desperate, vicious intensity that spoke of experience and anger. They rolled across the floor, knocking over chairs, sending papers flying. The robber got on top, his hands closing around the other man's throat. Karen stepped forward, the gun extended. "Get off him," she screamed. "Get off or I'll shoot." The robber looked up at her, and in that moment of distraction, the man beneath him drove a knee into his ribs. The robber grunted and rolled away, gasping for breath. The new arrival scrambled to his feet, and Karen finally got a good look at him. She almost dropped the gun. "Billy," she whispered. Billy Chen stood in the wreckage of the office, his face bloodied, his shirt torn, breathing hard. Billy Chen, the town drunk, the homeless guy who slept in his car behind the Walmart, the man everyone in Millbrook called Crazy Billy because he'd come back from overseas with ghosts in his eyes and voices in his head. Billy Chen, who Karen gave free coffee to on cold mornings because nobody else would. Billy Chen, who was now standing between her and a murderer, his hands raised and ready, his eyes clearer than Karen had ever seen them. "It's okay," Billy said, his voice steady. "I got him, you're safe now." Billy Chen had been sitting in his 1997 Honda Civic in the far corner of Murphy's parking lot when the robbery started. It wasn't stalking, though he knew how it might look to anyone who didn't understand. He just liked to make sure Karen got to her car safely at the end of her shift. Millbrook wasn't a dangerous town, but bad things could happen anywhere at any time to anyone. Billy knew that better than most. He'd learned it in Kandahar province, Afghanistan, in 2011. He'd learned it again in the VA hospital in Phoenix, where they'd tried to fix what the war had broken inside him. He'd learned it a third time on the streets of Millbrook, where the ghosts followed him, and the only thing that made them quiet was vodka and distance from other people. But Karen Hoa was different. Karen was kind. Karen gave him coffee and didn't look at him like he was broken. Karen treated him like he was still human, still worthy of basic dignity. So Billy watched, not close enough to be creepy, just close enough to make sure she was okay. He'd been dozing when the two men entered the gas station, but something about the way they moved had triggered his instincts, that combat awareness that had kept him alive in places where every pile of trash might hide an IED, every friendly face might be Taliban. He'd sat up, suddenly alert, watching through half-closed eyes. When the men locked the door, Billy had reached for his phone to call 911. When they pulled guns, his hand had frozen halfway to the dial button. When the gunshot rang out and Tommy Nguyen fell, Billy had been transported instantly back to a dusty street in Kandahar, watching his fire team leader take rounds from a sniper, while Billy pressed his hands uselessly against the wounds, trying to hold life inside a body that was determined to let it go. He'd sat paralyzed in his car, shaking, useless. The familiar chorus had started in his head. "You're a coward. You froze. You let another person die because you're broken and pathetic and worthless." But then he'd seen Karen's face through the window, terrified, trapped, about to die, and something in Billy had finally snapped into place. The ghosts could judge him later. Right now, someone needed help. Billy had grabbed the tire iron from his trunk and run toward the store. Now, in the office of Murphy's Gas and Go, with Karen holding a gun and a murderer getting ready to charge, Billy Chen felt more clear-headed than he had in 4 years. The robber lunged at him, fists swinging. Billy sidestepped, muscle memory from combatives training taking over, and drove his elbow into the man's ribs. The robber grunted but kept coming, grabbing Billy's shirt and slamming him against the wall. "You shouldn't have come here," the robber growled, his breath hot on Billy's face. "You shouldn't have gotten involved." Billy headbutted him. The robber staggered back, blood streaming from his nose. Billy pressed the advantage, driving forward with a series of quick strikes. Not fancy, not movie fighting, just simple. Brutal efficiency, learned from instructors who understood that combat was about survival, not style. Behind them, Karen still held the gun, her hands shaking so badly the barrel wobbled. "Shoot him," Billy shouted. "Karen, shoot him." "I can't," Karen's voice was breaking. "I can't, Billy, I don't know how." The robber pulled a knife from his boot, a fixed blade military style, and slashed at Billy's face. Billy jerked back, feeling the blade kiss his cheek, and then they were grappling again, fighting for control of the weapon. They crashed out of the office and into the main store, knocking over a display of antifreeze. The knife twisted between them, neither man able to gain full control. Billy could feel the robber's strength starting to fade. Panic and adrenaline could only carry you so far, but the knife was still dangerous, still capable of ending everything. "Karen," Billy grunted, trying to keep the blade away from his throat. "The police, where are the police?" "I don't know. I hit the alarm, they should be here." The robber got a hand free and punched Billy in the jaw. Stars exploded across Billy's vision. His grip on the knife loosened. The robber raised the blade high, ready to drive it down into Billy's chest. Karen fired the gun. The shot went wide, punching a hole in the ceiling and sending acoustic tiles raining down, but it was enough. The robber flinched, ducking instinctively, and Billy used the moment to twist the knife from his grip. The blade clattered across the floor. The robber scrambled for it. Billy dove, wrapping his arms around the man's legs, bringing him down hard. They rolled across the floor, past Tommy's body, through broken glass and spilled coffee. Billy ended up on top. He pulled his fist back and hit the robber in the face. Once, twice, 3 times. The man's nose broke with a wet crunch. Blood sprayed. Billy hit him again. "Billy, stop," Karen was screaming now. "Stop, you're killing him." Billy's fist froze in midair. He looked down at the robber, unconscious or close to it, face a mask of blood, no longer fighting, and felt the red haze lifting from his vision. His hands were shaking. His knuckles were split open. There was blood on his shirt that might have been his or might have been the robber's or might have been Tommy's. The ghosts were laughing at him in the back of his mind, telling him he was still just a killer, still just a weapon pointed in whatever direction someone else chose. "Billy," Karen's voice was softer now, closer. She'd come around the counter, still holding the gun but pointing it at the floor. "Billy, look at me." He looked up. Karen's face was pale, streaked with tears, but her eyes were steady. "You saved my life," she said quietly. "You understand, you saved me." Billy nodded numbly. His whole body hurt. His cheek was bleeding where the knife had caught him. His jaw throbbed where he'd been punched, but he was alive. Karen was alive. Tommy Nguyen was still dead on the floor. The sirens were close now, multiple vehicles, probably county sheriff and Millbrook police both, responding to the panic alarm. Red and blue lights painted the inside of the gas station in alternating colors of authority. Billy looked at the unconscious robber, then at Karen, then at his own bloodied hands. "I should go," he said. "What? No, Billy, you need to stay. You need to tell them what happened." "Karen, look at me." Billy gestured at himself, unshaven, disheveled, wearing clothes he'd been sleeping in for 3 days. "What do you think they're going to see? A hero, or a homeless vet beating the shit out of someone? But you saved. Just tell them I was here. Tell them what I did." "But I need to," Billy trailed off, unable to articulate the feeling of walls closing in. The sense that staying here would mean questions and attention and people looking at him, really looking at him, seeing how broken he was inside. The first police cruiser pulled into the parking lot. Billy stood up, wincing at the pain in his ribs. He looked at Karen one more time, this girl who'd shown him kindness when no one else would, who was alive now because he'd finally done something right, and then he turned toward the back exit. "Billy, wait." He paused at the door. "Thank you," Karen said. I'll tell everyone you're a hero." Billy Chen shook his head slowly. "Heroes don't run away." Then he pushed through the door and disappeared into the darkness behind Murphy's Gas and Go, just as the first police officer came through the front entrance with his weapon drawn and his radio crackling with urgent transmissions. Karen stood alone among the wreckage, holding a gun she barely knew how to use, standing over a murderer who was starting to moan and twitch back toward consciousness. The police officer took in the scene: broken glass, blood, Tommy's body, the unconscious man on the floor, and his face went pale beneath his tan. "Jesus Christ," he breathed, "what happened here?" Karen opened her mouth to answer, but before she could speak, the robber's eyes flickered open. He saw the police officer, saw Karen standing over him, saw the gun still in her hands. And he smiled. "She shot me," the robber said, his voice weak but clear. "That crazy bitch shot me for no reason. I just wanted to buy cigarettes." Part 3: The System. The Millbrook Police Department's interrogation room smelled like instant coffee and industrial disinfectant. Karen sat in a plastic chair that was bolted to the floor, her hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup of water she hadn't touched, and tried to explain for the 5th time what had happened at Murphy's Gas and Go. Detective Sarah Brennan sat across from her, a lean woman in her early 40s with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many bad things to be shocked by much anymore. She'd been with Millbrook PD for 17 years, and before that, she'd worked homicide in Phoenix. Tommy Nguyen's death was the first murder in Millbrook in 3 years. It was already the biggest case of Brennan's career in this small town. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Brennan said, her voice carefully neutral. "You're saying that Billy Chen, homeless Billy Chen, just happened to be in the parking lot when the robbery occurred?" "He wasn't just happening to be there," Karen said, exhaustion making her voice sharp. "He parks there sometimes. It's a public parking lot." "At midnight, he parks there at midnight." "Yes." Brennan made a note on her pad. "And you're not concerned about that? A man watching you work the night shift, parking in the lot, waiting for you." Karen felt anger flare in her chest. "He wasn't watching me like that. Billy's not. He's not a creep, he's just a homeless veteran with PTSD and a history of violent episodes," Brennan finished. "According to our records, he's been in 3 fights in the past 2 years, sent 2 people to the hospital. Bar fights, and they started it. Billy was defending himself. Or he has trouble controlling his temper." Brennan leaned forward. "Karen, I need you to really think about what you're telling me. This man, who you admit has mental health issues and a history of violence, just happened to be in your parking lot at the exact moment a robbery occurs. He assaults the suspect with enough force to break his nose and give him a concussion. Then he flees before police arrive. Does any of that strike you as the behavior of an innocent person? He saved my life. Did he, or did he escalate a situation that might have ended peacefully if he hadn't intervened?" Karen stared at the detective, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Tommy is dead. There was nothing peaceful about. Tommy Nguyen made a choice to pull a weapon he shouldn't have been carrying. That's tragic, but it doesn't change the facts about Billy Chen's involvement." Brennan consulted her notes. "The suspect, Marcus Knowles, claims that Mr. Chen attacked him without provocation. He says he was attempting to flee when Chen assaulted him." "That's a lie. Marcus shot Tommy. He was going to kill me." "According to you. But you're the only witness making that claim. Marcus Knowles has a very different version of events." Karen felt the room spinning. This couldn't be happening, this couldn't be real. "What about Ray?" she asked desperately. "The other robber. He ran away, but he was here, he saw everything. Find him and he'll tell you." "We have no evidence of a second suspect. No fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses placing anyone else at the scene. Because he ran away, before the police got there." "Or," Brennan said carefully, "he never existed. Karen, you've been through a traumatic experience. It's not unusual for people to misremember details or create false memories during high-stress situations. I'm not making him up. His name was Ray. Marcus said his name." Brennan was quiet for a long moment, studying Karen's face. Then she set down her pen and folded her hands on the table. "Here's what I think happened," she said, her voice softer now, almost sympathetic. "I think two men came into your store. I think one of them, Marcus Knowles, tried to rob you. I think your assistant manager made a terrible mistake and got himself killed. And I think Billy Chen saw an opportunity to play hero, maybe prove something to himself, and he beat the suspect half to death while you watched. Then he ran because he knew how bad it looked." No, that's not. "The problem is the physical evidence. The bullets we recovered from the scene match the weapon found near Marcus Knowles. Your fingerprints are on that weapon, Karen. Only yours, not Chen's. Not this alleged second suspect's. Yours." Karen's hand started shaking. "Because Billy knocked it out of Marcus's hand, I picked it up. I was trying to help. By pointing a loaded weapon at an unarmed man. He wasn't unarmed, he had a knife. We found the knife in Billy Chen's pocket when we picked him up an hour ago." The bottom dropped out of Karen's stomach. "What?" "Chen was found sleeping in his car behind the Walmart. When officers approached, he had the knife from the scene in his jacket pocket. He couldn't explain how it got there. Claimed he didn't remember taking it." Brennan's eyes were sharp now, watching Karen's reaction. "Here's what I think really happened. I think Billy Chen has been stalking you for months. I think he saw the robbery as his chance to be your savior, to force a relationship. I think he killed Tommy Nguyen himself, then beat Marcus Knowles and tried to frame him for the whole thing. And I think you're either protecting him because you feel sorry for him, or because you're afraid of what he'll do if you tell the truth." "That's insane." Karen was on her feet now, the plastic chair scraping loudly across the floor. "Billy saved my life. He's not a stalker, he's not a killer. He's just a man who was in the wrong place and did the right thing." "Then where is he? If he's innocent, why did he run?" Karen opened her mouth but had no answer. Because Billy had run. He disappeared into the night like a ghost, and now the police had him. And nothing Karen said seemed to matter because the system had already decided what version of the truth it wanted to believe. There was a knock on the door. A young officer stuck his head in. "Detective, the DA wants to see you." Brennan stood up. "Stay here, someone will bring you some food, we're not done talking." She left Karen alone in the interrogation room, and for the first time since the robbery, Karen let herself cry. Not the shocked, horrified tears from the gas station. These were tears of frustration and helplessness, the understanding that truth didn't matter if no one wanted to hear it. In another interrogation room 3 doors down, Billy Chen sat with his wrists handcuffed to a metal ring on the table and stared at the wall. The ghosts were back. They'd been waiting for him, of course. They always came back eventually. "You couldn't just let it go," they whispered. "You had to play hero. Look where it got you." Billy's cheek throbbed where the knife had cut him. His ribs ached where he'd been slammed into the filing cabinet. His hands were bandaged from the broken glass and the impact of his fists against Marcus Knowles' face. He'd killed before, in Afghanistan. That was different, that was war, that was orders, that was survival. But tonight, for those few seconds when he'd been on top of Knowles, raining down punches, lost in the red haze of violence, Billy had wanted to kill him. Had needed to. Not for Karen, not for justice, but because killing was the only thing Billy had ever been truly good at. The door opened. A man in a suit entered, late 50s, silver hair, expensive watch. He had the look of someone who'd spent his career winning arguments. "Mr. Chen, I'm District Attorney Howard Marsh. Do you know why you're here?" Billy said nothing. Marsh sat down across from him, opening a folder. "Let me lay out the situation for you. Tommy Nguyen is dead. Marcus Knowles is in the hospital with severe facial trauma. Karen Hoa is traumatized and telling a story that doesn't match the physical evidence. And you're a homeless veteran with PTSD, a history of violence, and a knife from the crime scene in your pocket." "I was trying to help," Billy said quietly. "I'm sure you were. But here's the problem. We have no evidence of a second robber. We have no evidence that Marcus Knowles fired the weapon that killed Tommy Nguyen. What we do have is your fingerprints all over the crime scene, Karen's statement that you assaulted Knowles, and a weapon you can't explain possessing." "Karen said I saved her." "Karen is confused and traumatized. She's not a reliable witness right now." Billy looked up at the DA, and something in his eyes must have been unsettling because Marsh shifted slightly in his seat. "What do you want?" Billy asked. "I want the truth. I want to know what really happened in that gas station." "I already told your detective." "Tell me again. Start from the beginning." So Billy did. He told Marsh about sitting in his car, watching to make sure Karen got safely to her vehicle like he did most nights. He told him about the two men entering the store, about the locked door and the guns. He told him about Tommy getting shot and Karen trapped behind shattered plexiglass. He told him about running into the store with a tire iron and fighting Knowles, and the knife and Karen firing the gun at the ceiling. Marsh listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When Billy finished, Marsh was quiet for a long moment. "That's a good story," he said finally. "Very detailed, very consistent with what Karen told Detective Brennan, almost like you coordinated it." "We didn't coordinate anything. It's what happened." "Except it's not, because the physical evidence tells a different story. The ballistics report shows that the bullets that killed Tommy Nguyen came from a gun with Karen's fingerprints on it. Only Karen's. The shell casings we found don't match the story you're telling. And Marcus Knowles, despite having a criminal record a mile long, is denying everything you've said. He's lying to save himself. Or you're lying to protect yourself and Karen." Marsh leaned forward. "Here's what I think happened. I think you've been obsessed with Karen Hoa for months. I think you saw those men enter the store and you saw your chance. Maybe you thought if you saved her, she'd finally see you as something other than the crazy homeless guy she pities. Maybe you thought you could be a hero again like you were in Afghanistan." "I wasn't a hero in Afghanistan." "No, you got the Bronze Star. That's pretty heroic." Billy laughed, a bitter sound that had no humor in it. "You want to know what I got the Bronze Star for? I called in an airstrike that killed 12 Taliban fighters. Also killed 4 civilians, including 2 kids. But we don't put that in the citation. We just call it collateral damage and pin a medal on your chest and tell you that you did good." Marsh's expression didn't change. "You're deflecting. We're talking about what happened tonight." "Tonight I stopped a robbery and saved someone's life. That's all. By assaulting an unarmed man. He had a gun, he shot Tommy. We have no evidence of that. What we have evidence of is you beating a man unconscious and then fleeing the scene. That's not heroism, Mr. Chen. That's assault and battery." Billy felt the walls closing in again. The room was too small. The air was too thick. The ghosts were getting louder. "I want a lawyer," he said. "You can't afford a lawyer." "Then get me a public defender." Marsh smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Mr. Chen, let me be very clear about your situation. You're looking at aggravated assault charges at minimum, possibly obstruction of justice. If I can prove you tampered with evidence or collaborated with Karen to frame Marcus Knowles, we're talking conspiracy. That's 5 to 10 years. In your condition, with your mental health issues, you probably wouldn't survive 3 years in state prison." "I didn't do anything wrong." That's not how this works. It doesn't matter what you did or didn't do. It matters what I can prove in court. And right now, the evidence is not in your favor. Marsh closed the folder. But I'm not an unreasonable man. I'm willing to make a deal. What kind of deal? You plead guilty to aggravated assault. You testify that you acted alone, that Karen had nothing to do with the fight, that you lost control and didn't mean to hurt anyone. In exchange, I recommend a suspended sentence and mandatory psychiatric treatment. You get help. You stay out of prison. Everybody wins. Billy stared at the DA, understanding finally settling over him like a cold blanket. You want me to say Karen did nothing? I want you to tell the truth. That she didn't do anything. She was behind the counter the whole time. I'm the one who fought Knowles. But you're also the one who had the knife. You're the one who fled. You're the one with the history of violence. Marsh stood up. Think about my offer, Mr. Chen. Because if this goes to trial and you lose, you're going to spend what's left of your life behind bars. And for what? To protect a girl who's too polite to tell you she wants you to stop hanging around her workplace. He left Billy alone in the interrogation room, and the ghost started laughing again. By 4 a.m., the story had spread through Millbrook like wildfire. Tommy Nguyen, beloved son, promising student at community college, engaged to be married, had been shot to death during a robbery. Marcus Knowles, career criminal with priors for armed robbery, had been brutally beaten by Billy Chen, who locals described as troubled and unstable. Karen Hoa was the traumatized witness caught between a murderer and a vigilante. That's what the TV news said. That's what the Millbrook Gazette would print in the morning. That's what people would believe because it was simpler than the truth, easier to process than the messy reality of what had actually happened. In her parents' house on Maple Street, Karen lay in her childhood bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to her mother sob in the next room. Her father had driven to the police station to pick her up after they'd finally released her at 2 a.m., and he'd been silent the whole way home, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Her phone buzzed with texts. Friends, coworkers, people she barely knew from high school, all wanting to know if she was okay, what had happened, was it true about Tommy, was it true about Billy Chen? Karen turned off her phone. Tommy was dead because he tried to be a hero. Billy was in jail because he'd succeeded. And Marcus Knowles was going to walk away from murder because the system believed his lies better than it believed her truth. Karen closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but all she could see was Tommy falling, Billy fighting, blood spreading across cracked concrete. The world wasn't supposed to work like this. Heroes were supposed to win. Justice was supposed to prevail. But in the real world in Millbrook, on a Tuesday night in March, none of that mattered. In the real world, the only thing that mattered was which version of the story people chose to believe. 3 days after Tommy Nguyen's funeral, Karen Hoa walked into the office of Jennifer Cordova, attorney at law, and found herself staring at walls covered in diplomas, bar certifications, and newspaper clippings about cases won and causes championed. Jennifer Cordova was 41 years old, had graduated top of her class from Georgetown Law, and had spent the first decade of her career as a prosecutor in Los Angeles before burning out and moving to Millbrook to practice small-town law. She handled divorces, estate planning, the occasional DUI. She'd never defended someone accused of aggravated assault. But she'd read about the gas station case in the Millbrook Gazette, and something about it had bothered her enough that, when Karen had called asking for help, Jennifer had agreed to meet despite knowing the client couldn't afford her fees. "Tell me everything," Jennifer said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "Don't leave anything out." Karen talked for 2 hours. Jennifer listened, taking notes, occasionally interrupting to ask clarifying questions. When Karen finally finished, Jennifer sat back in her chair and was quiet for a long moment. "Well," she said finally, "you're right about one thing. This is completely fucked up." Karen almost laughed. Is that your legal opinion? That's my human opinion. My legal opinion is more complicated. Jennifer consulted her notes. Let's talk about what we're up against. Marcus Knowles has a public defender who's already filed a motion to dismiss based on lack of evidence. He's claiming he was the victim of an unprovoked assault by Billy Chen. That's not what happened. I know, but here's the problem. The physical evidence is ambiguous at best. The ballistics report is inconclusive about who fired the shot that killed Tommy. The fingerprints on the weapon are only yours and Knowles's, which Knowles's attorney is arguing proves he was defending himself from you. The alleged second suspect has never been found. His name was Ray. Marcus called him Ray. Did anyone else hear that? Karen's heart sank. Billy, who is currently charged with assault and can't be considered a credible witness because he has a vested interest in supporting your version of events. Jennifer rubbed her temples. The DA is building a narrative that's clean and simple. Marcus Knowles attempted a robbery. Tommy Nguyen tried to stop him, got shot in the struggle, and Billy Chen, already unstable and obsessed with you, used the chaos as an excuse to nearly beat Knowles to death. In that narrative, you're just a traumatized victim who doesn't understand what she saw. And in reality, two men attempted an armed robbery. One of them killed Tommy, and Billy Chen saved your life. But reality and what we can prove in court are two different things. Karen felt tears burning behind her eyes. So what do? We find Ray. Jennifer stood up and walked to the window looking out at Millbrook's Main Street, quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where violent crime wasn't supposed to happen. If we can find the second suspect, if we can get him to testify or even just prove he existed, then everything changes. Knowles's story falls apart. The DA has to reconsider his case. Billy gets exonerated. How do we find someone who ran away 3 days ago and could be anywhere in the country by now? Jennifer turned back to Karen, and there was something fierce in her eyes, a glimpse of the prosecutor she used to be, the woman who'd built a reputation in Lowe's Angels by never giving up on the truth. We do what the police should have done from the start. We investigate, we follow leads, we turn over every rock until we find him. She paused. But I need to know something first. Are you prepared for what this might cost? Not money, though this will drain your savings and more. I'm talking about the cost of fighting the system, of standing up when powerful people want you to sit down. The DA is going to paint you as an unreliable witness. The media is going to dig into your life. People in this town are going to take sides. Your family might suffer. Your future might suffer. And at the end of all of it, we might still lose. Karen thought about Tommy Nguyen, who'd been buried 2 days ago in a cemetery on the outskirts of town. His fiancée had collapsed at the graveside, wailing so loudly that Karen had heard it from 30 yards away. His parents had looked at Karen with eyes that said, "Why are you alive and our son is dead?" She thought about Billy Chen, sitting in county lockup because he tried to do the right thing. She thought about Marcus Knowles, who'd shot an innocent man and was going to walk free if nobody stopped him. "I don't care what it costs," Karen said. "I'm not letting them rewrite what happened. I'm not letting Billy go to prison for saving my life. Whatever it takes, I'm in." Jennifer smiled. "Good, then let's get to work." The first break came from an unexpected source, the truck driver who'd stopped for gas during the robbery. Jennifer found him through traffic camera footage from Highway 47, cross-referenced with credit card transactions from nearby gas stations. His name was Dale Hoffman, 53 years old, long-haul trucker based out of Missouri. He'd stopped at Murphy's Gas and Go at 11:53 p.m. to refuel, seen the lights on and the door open, tried to go inside to pay, been turned away by someone shouting that the store was closed. When Jennifer called him, he remembered the incident clearly. "Was weird," Dale said over the phone, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes and diesel fumes. "Store was all lit up, but the guy yelling at me sounded panicked. Not angry panicked, scared panicked. and I could see through the window. There was someone behind the counter, but it wasn't the usual girl who worked nights. You knew Karen? Sure, stopped there once or twice a month on my route. She was always friendly. Good kid. Can you describe the person you saw behind the counter? Big guy, wearing a dark jacket, baseball cap. That's all I could see from the pumps. Was there anyone else? Dale was quiet for a moment, thinking. Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, there was another guy, tall, skinny, wearing a hoodie. He came out of the store right after the first guy yelled at me to leave, got into a dark sedan, maybe a Nissan or a Honda, and peeled out of the parking lot like his ass was on fire. Jennifer felt her pulse quicken. Did you get a license plate? Sorry, it was dark. I was annoyed about having to drive 10 more miles for gas. I just wanted to get back on the road. Would you be willing to testify to this in court? Testify? Hell, I don't know. I drive through 3 states a week. I can't be sitting in some courtroom waiting around. Mr. Hoffman, a man is dead. Another man is facing prison for trying to save someone's life. Your testimony could change everything. Dale sighed. All right, yeah, I'll do it, but you better make it fast. I got a job, you know. Jennifer thanked him and hung up, then immediately called Detective Brennan. We need to talk, Jennifer said. I have a witness who can place a second suspect at the scene. The Millbrook Police Department's conference room was cramped and stuffy. Detective Brennan sat on one side of the table, Jennifer Cordova on the other. Between them was a laptop showing grainy traffic camera footage. This is Dale Hoffman leaving Murphy's at 11:54 p.m., Jennifer said, pointing at the screen. He confirms there were 2 men at the scene, one behind the counter, one who fled in a dark sedan immediately after the robbery began to go wrong. Brennan watched the footage without expression. That doesn't prove anything. Could have been a customer who got spooked. A customer who ran away, didn't call 911, drove off so fast the truck driver noticed. Doesn't make him a robber. No, but it makes him a lead you should have followed up on. Jennifer leaned forward. Why didn't you pull traffic cam footage? Why didn't you interview the truck driver? Why didn't you even look for a second suspect? Because we had no evidence of a second suspect. We still don't. You have Karen's testimony. From a traumatized witness who admittedly fired a weapon during the incident. Her memory isn't reliable. And Marcus Knowles's memory is. A career criminal with every reason to lie. Brennan's jaw tightened. I don't appreciate you coming in here and telling me how to do my job. We investigated this case thoroughly. You investigated the case that was easiest to close. You built a narrative that wrapped everything up neat and tidy and didn't require you to actually do the hard work of finding the truth. That's not fair. Isn't it? Jennifer stood up, gathering her papers. A homeless veteran is sitting in county lockup right now because you decided he was more convenient as a suspect than as a witness. A murderer is about to walk free because you couldn't be bothered to check traffic cameras. And a girl who survived a robbery is being treated like she's either lying or crazy because the evidence doesn't fit your predetermined conclusion. I'm trying to find justice for Tommy Nguyen. Then help me find Ray. Help me find the second suspect. Because until we do, there is no justice. There's just whatever story the DA can sell to a jury. Brennan was quiet for a long moment, her expression conflicted. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. Even if I wanted to help, and I'm not saying I do, what makes you think we can find this guy? He's had 3 days to run. He could be in Canada by now. Maybe, or maybe he's still close. Most criminals don't run as far as you'd think. They go to ground somewhere familiar, somewhere they feel safe. Jennifer pulled out a printed screenshot from the traffic camera. The sedan Dale Hoffman saw, it was heading east on Highway 47. That's toward the state line, but there are a dozen small towns between here and there. Motels, bars, places where someone could hide if they needed to. That's a lot of ground to cover. Then we better start now. They found Ray 3 days later in a motel outside of Harpersville, 2 towns over from Millbrook. His real name was Raymond Costas, and he had a record going back 15 years. Armed robbery, assault, possession with intent to distribute. He'd been released from state prison 8 months earlier and had apparently decided to celebrate his freedom by partnering with Marcus Knowles for one last score. When the police kicked in the door of room 118 at the Sunset Motor Lodge, they found Ray passed out drunk in his underwear with $1,300 in cash scattered across the bed and a loaded 9 pistol on the nightstand. He didn't resist arrest. The interrogation room at Millbrook Police Department had never felt smaller. Ray sat across from Detective Brennan and DA Howard Marsh, his court-appointed attorney beside him. He looked like someone who'd been living on gas station food and cheap whiskey for 3 days, haggard, unshaven, eyes bloodshot and hollow. "You're in a lot of trouble, Raymond," Marsh said, his voice deceptively gentle. "Armed robbery, accessory to murder, fleeing the scene. We're talking 25 to life." Ray said nothing. "But here's the thing. We both know you didn't pull the trigger. That was your partner, Marcus Knowles. You were just there. Maybe you didn't even know he was going to shoot anyone. Maybe you told him not to. Maybe you ran because you were scared." Ray's attorney leaned over and whispered something. Ray shook his head. "My client wishes to invoke his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent." Marsh nodded slowly. "That's his prerogative. But before he does, he should know that Marcus Knowles is currently telling everyone who will listen that Raymond Costas was the ringleader, that the whole robbery was Ray's idea, that Ray was the one who shot Tommy Nguyen." Ray's head snapped up. "That's bullshit. I never even touched a gun that night." "Then tell us what happened." Ray looked at his attorney, who gave him a small nod. "It was supposed to be simple," Ray said, his voice rough. "In and out. Wave the guns around, grab the money, leave. Marcus said he'd done it before, said gas stations were easy because they never had more than a couple $100 in the register, and nobody wanted to die for minimum wage." "Whose idea was it to rob Murphy specifically?" "Marcus's. He said he'd been watching the place, knew the patterns, knew there was only one person working the night shift." Brennan leaned forward. "Did he mention Karen Hoa specifically?" "No, I mean he said there was a girl who worked nights, pretty, young, he thought she'd be easy to scare." Ray rubbed his face with both hands. "I should have known something was wrong when we got there. Marcus was too wired, too excited. This wasn't just about money for him, this was something else." "What do you mean?" "I mean he was looking at her weird, like he knew her, like this was personal." Karen's stomach twisted as she watched the interrogation through the one-way mirror. Jennifer stood beside her, taking notes. "Did you know Marcus was going to shoot Tommy Nguyen?" Marsh asked. "No, hell no. That assistant manager came out of nowhere, pulled his own gun. Marcus panicked. I heard the shot and I ran. I knew it had all gone to shit. I knew someone was dead. I just wanted to get out." "And you didn't think to call the police?" "And tell them what? That I was part of a robbery where someone got killed. I may be stupid, but I'm not that stupid." Marsh slid a photograph across the table. "Do you recognize this man?" Ray looked at the photo of Billy Chen. "No, who is he?" "This is the man who fought Marcus Knowles after you left. The man Marcus is claiming attacked him without provocation." "I don't know anything about that. I was gone by then." "But you were there when Marcus shot Tommy Nguyen." Ray was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Yeah, I was there." "And you'll testify to that in court?" Ray looked at his attorney, who nodded. "If you give me a deal, yeah, I'll testify." The Millbrook County Courthouse was a red brick building built in 1923, with wooden benches that creaked and ceiling fans that did little to cut the summer heat. It had seen dozens of trials over the decades, divorces, property disputes, the occasional assault case, but nothing like the trial of Marcus Knowles. The state of Missouri v. Marcus James Knowles became the biggest thing to happen in Millbrook since the tornado of 2003. The courtroom was packed every day with townspeople, journalists, true crime bloggers, and court TV cameras. Tommy Nguyen's family sat in the front row on the prosecution side, their faces stoic and grief-stricken. Billy Chen, charges against him dropped after Ray's confession, sat in the back, trying to be invisible. Karen Hoa was the prosecution's star witness. She took the stand on day 3 of the trial, wearing a simple blue dress and the same necklace her grandmother had given her before she died. Her hands were shaking as she placed them on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. D.A. Howard Marsh stood up and gave her what was probably meant to be a reassuring smile. "Ms. Hoa, can you tell the jury what happened on the night of March 15th? Karen took a deep breath and began to speak. She told them everything. About Marcus and Ray entering the store, about the guns, about Tommy trying to be a hero, about the gunshot and the blood and the shattered plexiglass, about Marcus climbing through the barrier and pressing a gun to her head, about Billy Chen crashing through the door like something out of a movie. Marcus's defense attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Philip Romano who'd driven in from St. Louis, stood up for cross-examination with a predatory smile. "Ms. Hoa, you testified that there were 2 robbers. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And yet you didn't mention this second robber, Raymond Costas, to the police until several days after the incident. Why is that?" "I did tell them. Detective Brennan didn't believe me." "Or perhaps you didn't mention it because you were traumatized and confused about what you saw." "I wasn't confused. There were 2 men." "But you admit you were traumatized." "Of course I was traumatized. Someone died." Romano nodded sympathetically. "Exactly. You were traumatized. You just witnessed a violent death. You'd fired a weapon yourself. Is it possible that in your traumatized state you misremembered certain details?" "No, I remember everything clearly." "Do you? Let's talk about the weapon you fired. You testified that you picked it up after Mr. Chen knocked it from my client's hand. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And where exactly was Mr. Chen when you picked up this weapon?" Karen hesitated, suddenly seeing the trap. "He was fighting with Marcus." "Fighting? So he was engaged in a violent physical altercation with my client. He was stopping him from—" "Yes or no, Ms. Hoa? Was Mr. Chen fighting with my client?" "Yes." "And during this fight, you were holding a loaded weapon, a weapon you admit you don't know how to use properly." "I was trying to help." "You fired that weapon, didn't you? You testified that you fired at the ceiling, but you're not an experienced shooter. You were scared, traumatized, holding an unfamiliar weapon while 2 men fought in front of you. Is it possible you didn't fire at the ceiling? Is it possible you fired at the 2 men and hit one of them?" "No, I fired up. I saw the bullet hit the ceiling." "You saw it or you remember seeing it? Because those are different things, Ms. Hoa. Memory is a tricky thing, especially under stress." Jennifer Cordova stood up. Objection, badgering the witness. "Sustained," Judge Harold Michaels said. "Mr. Romano, move on." But the damage was done. Karen could see it in the faces of the jury, doubt creeping in, questions forming. By the time she left the stand, she felt like she'd been taken apart and put back together wrong. Raymond Costas testified on day 5. He was pale and sweating in his Orange County jumpsuit, his hands shaking as he swore the oath. The deal he'd negotiated with the DA was simple: testify truthfully about the robbery, and he'd get 15 years instead of life. It wasn't a good deal, but it was better than dying in prison. Marsh walked him through the entire night. The planning, the entry, the guns, the panic when Tommy had appeared with a weapon. "Who shot Tommy Nguyen?" Marsh asked. Ray pointed at Marcus Knowles. "He did, I saw it. Marcus pulled the trigger." Romano's cross-examination was brutal. Mr. Costas, you've been offered a plea deal in exchange for your testimony. Is that correct? Yes. So you have every reason to lie, to say whatever the prosecution wants you to say, to save yourself from a life sentence. I'm not lying. Aren't you? You're a career criminal with multiple priors. You've lied to police before. You've lied to judges before. Why should this jury believe anything you say? Because I was there, I saw what happened. You also ran away and didn't report it to the police. You hid in a motel room for 3 days. You only came forward after you were arrested. That doesn't sound like someone who's interested in telling the truth. That sounds like someone who's interested in saving his own skin. Ray's attorney objected, but Romano had made his point. Billy Chen took the stand on day 7, and Karen held her breath. Billy looked different, cleaned up, wearing a borrowed suit, his beard trimmed, his hair cut. He looked almost normal, almost like the person he'd been before Afghanistan and the VA hospital and the long descent into homelessness. But Karen could see the ghosts in his eyes. They were always there. Marsh asked Billy to describe what he'd seen from the parking lot, and Billy did, his voice steady and clear. He described the 2 men entering, the locked door, the gunshot, his decision to intervene. Why did you decide to go into the store? Marsh asked. Because someone needed help. But you didn't call 911 first. There wasn't time. By the time police arrived, Karen would have been dead. So you took the law into your own hands. Billy was quiet for a moment. I stopped a robbery, that's all. Romano stood up for cross-examination, with barely concealed contempt. Mr. Chen, you've been diagnosed with PTSD. Is that correct? Yes. And you've had violent episodes in the past, bar fights, public disturbances. I've defended myself when attacked. Or you've attacked others when you were experiencing a mental health crisis. Romano pulled out a police report. March 2023. You assaulted 2 men outside a bar in Harpersville, sending one to the hospital with a broken jaw. They jumped me in the parking lot. I defended myself. That's your version. The police report says you were screaming about Taliban fighters and insurgents, that you were experiencing a psychotic episode. Billy's jaw tightened. I was having a bad night. A bad night. And on the night of the robbery, were you having another bad night? Were you perhaps experiencing another episode when you decided to attack my client? I wasn't experiencing anything except watching a man try to kill someone I cared about. Romano pounced. Someone you cared about? You mean Ms. Hoa, the woman you've been stalking for months, the woman whose work schedule you memorized, the woman you watch from your car in the parking lot night after night. Objection. Jennifer was on her feet. Counsel is mischaracterizing the witness's testimony. Sustained. Mr. Romano, stick to the facts. But again, the damage was done. The jury saw Billy Chen, mentally ill, potentially violent, obsessed with a young woman half his age, and Karen could see doubt spreading across their faces like a stain. By the time Billy left the stand, he looked smaller, diminished, like the system had taken whatever dignity he'd managed to reclaim and crushed it under the weight of legal procedure and character assassination. The trial lasted 14 days. Marcus Knowles never took the stand. Romano was too smart to put him in front of a jury, but his presence loomed over every moment of the proceedings. He sat at the defense table in a suit and tie, looking more like a concerned citizen than a murderer, occasionally whispering to his attorney or taking notes on a legal pad. Karen watched him every day, trying to understand how someone could kill another person and then sit in a courtroom pretending to be the victim. The closing arguments came on day 14. Marsh went first, methodically laying out the evidence. Ray's testimony, the timeline, the physical evidence, the 911 call, the traffic camera footage showing Ray fleeing the scene. He talked about Tommy Nguyen, a good kid, a hard worker, someone with his whole life ahead of him, cut down by a bullet from Marcus Knowles's gun. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Marsh said, "this isn't a complicated case. Two men walked into a gas station with guns. One of them shot and killed an innocent person. The other one ran away. The evidence is clear. The witnesses are consistent. Marcus Knowles is guilty of first-degree murder, and it's your job to hold him accountable." Romano's closing was a masterpiece of misdirection and doubt. He talked about reasonable doubt, about how Raymond Costas, a career criminal with every reason to lie, was the prosecution's star witness, about how Karen Hoa, traumatized and confused, couldn't be trusted to remember details clearly, about how Billy Chen, mentally ill and potentially violent, had been the real aggressor. "Is Marcus Knowles innocent?" Romano asked, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I don't know, but that's not the question. The question is, has the prosecution proven beyond a reasonable doubt that he's guilty? And the answer, ladies and gentlemen, is no. There are too many questions, too many inconsistencies, too much room for doubt. And in America, when there's doubt, we don't convict, we acquit." The jury deliberated for 3 days. Karen spent those 3 days in a fog, unable to eat, unable to sleep, replaying every moment of the trial in her mind and wondering what she could have said differently, what she could have done better. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, the bailiff announced that the jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom filled quickly. Karen sat between Jennifer and Billy, their hands linked together like survivors of a shipwreck clinging to debris. Tommy's parents sat in the front row, his mother clutching rosary beads, his father staring straight ahead with empty eyes. Marcus Knowles stood as the jury foreman. A middle-aged woman who owned the hardware store on Main Street read the verdict. "On the count of first-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty." Karen's sob echoed through the courtroom. Tommy's mother collapsed into her husband's arms. The press section erupted with the sound of typing and whispered phone calls. Marcus Knowles stood perfectly still, his face blank, and for just a moment Karen saw something flash in his eyes, not remorse, not fear, but a cold, calculating anger that suggested this wasn't over, that somehow, some way, he would find a way to make them all pay for this. Then the bailiffs were taking him away, leading him through the side door toward the county jail where he'd wait for sentencing, and the courtroom was emptying, and people were crying and hugging and congratulating each other, and Karen felt absolutely nothing except exhausted relief that it was finally over. 3 months later, on a warm evening in June, Karen Hoa sat on the dock behind Murphy's Gas and Go and watched the sun set over the creek that ran behind the property. The gas station had been closed for 2 weeks while corporate decided what to do with it. There had been talk of tearing it down, too much bad publicity, too many people who would forever associate it with Tommy Nguyen's death. But in the end, economics won out. A gas station on Highway 47 was valuable real estate. They'd remodeled, changed the name to Quick Stop, hired all new staff, and tried to pretend nothing had ever happened. Karen had been offered her job back. She'd politely declined. "Figured I'd find you here." Karen turned to see Billy Chen walking across the parking lot, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the new cafe that had opened on Main Street. He looked good, better than she'd ever seen him. The VA had finally come through with the treatment they should have given him years ago. He had an apartment now, a studio on the 2nd floor of Mrs. Henderson's old Victorian house. He had a job at the hardware store, stocking shelves and helping customers. He had a therapist, medication that actually worked, and a support group that met every Thursday night. He was rebuilding himself, one day at a time. "Coffee?" he offered, sitting down beside her on the dock. "Thanks." Karen took the cup, warming her hands even though the evening was mild. "You heard about Marcus?" "The sentencing? Yeah, 25 to life with no parole for 20 years. Billy sipped his coffee. "He'll die in prison." "Good." They sat in silence for a while, watching the creek flow past, carrying leaves and debris toward the river beyond. "Do you ever think about that night?" Corinne asked. "Every day." "Me too. I keep replaying it in my head, thinking about all the ways it could have gone differently. If Tommy hadn't pulled his gun, if you hadn't been there, if I just told Marcus where the safe was. If you told him where the safe was, he would have killed you both." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. Men like Marcus don't leave witnesses. Ray testified that Marcus was planning to kill everyone in the store once they had the money. You, Tommy, anyone who happened to walk in. He's done it before in Kansas City. Shot a convenience store clerk in the back of the head after getting what he wanted. That's who Marcus Knowles is. That's what we stopped." Corinne shuddered. She'd read the transcript of Ray's testimony, seen the evidence from the Kansas City case that Romano had successfully gotten excluded from trial. Marcus Knowles was a serial armed robber with at least one other murder to his name. The gas station robbery hadn't been his first, and if they hadn't stopped him, it wouldn't have been his last. "I got a letter from Tommy's mom," Corinne said quietly. "She thanked me. Can you believe that? She said she was glad Tommy didn't die for nothing, that at least his death helped put a murderer behind bars." Corinne's voice cracked. "But he did die for nothing, Billy. He died because he tried to be a hero with a gun he didn't know how to use properly. He died because the world is stupid and unfair, and sometimes bad things happen to good people for no reason at all." Billy set down his coffee and turned to face her. "Tommy died because Marcus Knowles shot him, not because he tried to help, not because the world is unfair, because a bad man made a choice to pull a trigger. That's on Marcus, not on you, not on me, not on Tommy, just Marcus." "I know that intellectually, but emotionally," Corinne trailed off, unable to articulate the guilt that still sat like a stone in her chest, the feeling that she should have done something different, been smarter, been faster, been better. "It gets easier," Billy said. "Not better, but easier. The ghosts get quieter. You learn to live with the memories instead of drowning in them." "Is that what you've learned?" "It's what I'm learning. Every day I wake up and I'm still learning it." Billy looked out at the creek. "I spent 4 years thinking I was broken beyond repair, that the war had destroyed something essential in me and I'd never get it back. But that night at the gas station when I saw you in danger and I made the choice to run toward the problem instead of away from it, I realized I'm not broken. I'm just damaged, and damaged things can be fixed." Corinne reached over and squeezed his hand. "You saved my life. And you saved mine, by treating me like a human being when nobody else would, by giving me coffee and talking to me like I mattered. You reminded me that I was more than the worst thing that ever happened to me." Billy squeezed back. "We saved each other, that's how it works." The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistled its lonely song. The creek flowed on, indifferent to human drama, carrying the detritus of life toward the ocean. "What happens now?" Corinne asked. Now we figure out how to keep living. You're starting classes at the community college in August, right? Criminal justice degree. I figure if I'm going to be traumatized by the legal system, I might as well understand how it works." Billy laughed. "That's one way to look at it. What about you? You going to keep stocking shelves at the hardware store?" "For now, it's honest work. It pays the bills. And Mrs. Henderson needs help fixing up the apartments in her building, so I'm learning carpentry on the side. Maybe I'll start my own handyman business someday. Nothing fancy, just helping people fix things." "That suits you." "What does?" "Fixing things, making things better." Corinne looked at Billy, this unlikely hero, this broken man who'd put himself back together with coffee and therapy, and the simple human need to help someone in distress. "The world needs more people like you. The world needs more people like both of us. People who stand up when bad things happen. People who refuse to pretend everything is fine when it's not. People who care about truth even when lies are easier." They sat on the dock until full dark, talking about nothing and everything, Two survivors trying to make sense of the senseless, trying to find meaning in trauma, trying to believe that the future could be better than the past. Jennifer Cordova's car pulled into the parking lot, and she walked over to the dock, her heels clicking on the wooden planks. "I've been looking for you too," she said. "I wanted to give you this before it hits the news." She handed them a manila envelope. Inside was a letter from the governor's office and a certificate with both their names. For exceptional bravery in the face of danger and outstanding service to the community of Millbrook, the state of Missouri hereby awards the Civilian Medal of Valor to Karen Hoa and William Chen. "It's mostly ceremonial," Jennifer said, "but I thought you should know. There's going to be a ceremony at the Capitol in August. Press, politicians, the whole thing. You don't have to go if you don't want to." Karen stared at the certificate, unsure how to feel. A medal felt simultaneously like too much and not nearly enough. A small piece of paper trying to compensate for trauma, for loss, for a young man who'd never get to see his wedding day. "Will Tommy's family be there?" Karen asked. "Yes, they'll be presenting a posthumous award in his name. The Tommy Nguyen Memorial Scholarship. Full ride to community college for any Millbrook High School graduate who wants to study criminal justice or social work." Karen's eyes filled with tears. "He'd like that. Tommy always wanted to help people." "But he did help people. He died trying to protect you." Jennifer sat down on the dock beside them. "I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you did something important. You stood up against a system that wanted to bury the truth. You refused to let a murderer walk free. You saved lives, not just your own, but all the future victims Marcus Knowles would have hurt if he'd gotten away with it. That matters." "Does it?" Billy asked quietly. "Because from where I'm sitting, the system still tried to destroy us. If Ray hadn't gotten drunk and stupid, if Dale Hoffman hadn't remembered seeing him leave, if you hadn't been willing to fight, we'd both be in prison right now, and Marcus Knowles would be free. But that's not what happened. You got lucky, yes. The system failed, absolutely. But in the end, the truth won. Not because the system worked, but because people like you fought to make it work." Jennifer stood up, brushing off her skirt. "That's all we can do, really. Fight when we need to fight. Tell the truth when people want us to lie. Show up for each other when the world tries to push us down. It's not much, but it's something." She left them with the certificate and the weight of recognition they weren't sure they'd earned. The ceremony at the Capitol was held on a bright August morning, with television cameras and a military band, and a speech from the governor about heroism and sacrifice, and the bonds that hold communities together. Karen wore the same blue dress she'd worn to testify in court, because it felt wrong to celebrate when Tommy Nguyen was still dead. Billy wore his army dress uniform, which he'd kept in storage for 12 years and which still fit perfectly, because some things, training, discipline, the muscle memory of service, never really leave you. Tommy's parents received their award with quiet dignity, his mother crying silently while his father clutched the plaque that bore their son's name. The scholarship fund had already raised $60,000. Tommy's fiancée had donated her engagement ring to be auctioned, unable to look at it without breaking down. The governor called Karen and Billy to the stage together. He talked about their bravery, their quick thinking, their selfless actions that had saved lives and brought a murderer to justice. He pinned medals on their chests, small pieces of metal shaped like stars, suspended from red, white, and blue ribbons, and shook their hands while photographers captured the moment. Karen looked out at the crowd and saw the faces of Millbrook, shop owners and teachers, Tommy's family and her own parents, Detective Brennan and D.A. Marsh, who'd both come around eventually, too late to help, but at least willing to acknowledge they'd been wrong. She saw the press section, already typing their stories about the hero and the gas station clerk, crafting narratives that would turn a chaotic, traumatic, senseless night into something clean and inspiring, and easily digestible for a public that wanted simple stories with clear morals. And she realized that the truth would never fully be known, Not really. People would remember the version of events that fit their preferred narrative. Some would see Billy as a hero. Others would always think of him as the crazy homeless vet who got lucky. Some would see Karen as brave. Others would see her as the girl who froze while a real hero, Tommy, died trying to save her. None of them would understand what it was actually like to stand behind shattered plexiglass, with a gun pointed at your head, making split-second decisions that would haunt you forever regardless of whether you chose right or wrong. The ceremony ended. The crowd dispersed. Karen and Billy walked down the Capitol steps together, their medals heavy on their chests, their futures uncertain but at least their presence survivable. "You okay?" Billy asked. "No," Karen said honestly, "but I will be someday." "That's all we can ask for." They reached the bottom of the steps where Jennifer was waiting with Karen's parents and a small group of supporters from Millbrook who'd driven 2 hours to be there. Karen's mother embraced her, crying, apologizing for all the times she'd been angry or drunk or cruel, promising to do better, to be better, to deserve a daughter who'd shown this much strength. Karen held her and hoped she meant it this time, but also knew that hope and reality didn't always align, and that was okay because she was learning to protect herself, to set boundaries, to understand that you could love someone and still keep them at a safe distance. Billy stood apart from the group, not quite part of their circle but not entirely separate either. He caught Karen's eye and gave her a small nod, a gesture that meant "I'm here if you need me, and I understand if you need space, and we survived, and that's enough for now." Karen nodded back, and in that wordless exchange was everything that mattered. Recognition, respect, shared trauma transmuted into shared strength. 6 months later, on a cold December evening, Billy Chen sat in his small apartment and opened a letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Inside was notification that his disability rating had been increased to 100%, which meant better health care, more support, and actual livable income. It also meant official recognition that the war had broken something in him that would never fully heal, that he would carry Afghanistan with him for the rest of his life like shrapnel embedded too deep to safely remove.